Many times, when talking about astrology, especially in this day and age in which we've had decades and decades and decades of sun sign horoscopes, being readily available, and oftentimes people having no idea that there's so many different ways of understanding the planets in relation to us as human beings on Earth. I didn't discover my natal chart until about 2.5 years ago. And I finally saw, okay, so this is the scientific part of it. This is how it makes sense. Understanding these angles of the planets to Earth actually does make psychological sense. It's worth checking out. So, naturally, before discovering natal chart, before knowing all the different intricacies of astrology, even I was kind of skeptical, and thankfully, I've figured some things out. I've done some research, and I've seen how it applies, how useful it is. And so I figured I'd make a video to kind of basically address the biggest, I guess you could say, skeptics' argument against astrology. And I've covered this in a couple of videos already on the precession of the equinoxes, and there I go a lot more in depth. But basically, to sum up all of that, to make this a really handy, video. The plane of the solar system, all of the planets revolving around the sun are within the same plane. Our perspective of this is changing, hence the precession of the equinoxes. That is because we are slightly tilted on our axis. And so, in a very, very slow cycle of about every 2,000 years or so, we're not only, of course, revolving on the sun and rotating, but we're also a very slight, subtle cycle, tilting, as a top would. And this cycle takes about 22,000 years. And from our perspective, because of this tilt, we look out into the stars, and they're different from where they were 2,000 years ago. Now, that's because our perspective is different. It's not like, the planets and the stars are going flying everywhere around us in a non-orderly, non-predictable fashion. It doesn't surprise astronomers and astrologers that this happens and that our views of the heavens change. But basically, when the Babylonians codified astrology, they basically codified the 12 different directions from Earth into space, which again, because of the plane of the solar system, all the planets going around the Earth, in a very, I want to say it's like within 30 degrees, but I'm not exactly sure. But basically, because there's this order, the Earth, no matter our perspective, on this top, is being influenced by the planets in ways that are very easy to understand. And it's always the same 12 directions. And of course, again, this is why cusps are so important to study as well. And a lot of people have been asking for that. So, okay, two with one stone. It's 360 degrees around us, and it's roughly 12 directions, but of course those directions bleed into each other because it's space. It's not like, okay, here is this solar system and there is that solar system, and there's no influence in whatever. So that explains, I would say, the most... I remember I had an astronomy professor, a genius of a man, who hated astrology. He would constantly deride it, and he brought up this point. This was kind of his whole argument was based on this point. And it got me thinking, and that is a very interesting point. Why is it that the region of space that we designate as Taurus is now, I think the constellation is Gemini or Aries, I don't know which way it goes, but basically because of our tilt, because of our perspective from Earth. And again, the Babylonians, when they codified the 12 different directions into psychological predispositions, Gemini means you're going to talk a lot, you're going to use your hands a lot, you're going to communicate. They matched that up with the constellations that were present with that space at that time. And again, because of our tilt, now it's about a sign difference. But of course, what they've codified is incredibly useful, and we now know that region of space influencing us. Even though the constellation of Cancer is different, that region of space influencing us influences us in Cancerian ways, codified as being psychologically emotional, being very intuitive, yada, yada, yada. So there's a little bit summary of that, and I wanted to offer a very, what I think is compelling thought, is for those who are skeptical of astrology. Imagine, it sounds so silly, imagine what life would be like without the sun. You wouldn't even exist. This light here is present because of ultimately sunlight. That is what gives energy to our entire solar system. I wish I knew the scale. Where's my book? Oh, I feel like it'll take too long to go into, but look it up for yourself. The scale of the mass of the sun, how big the sun is in relation to the Earth, and then look at Mercury, Venus. Now, admittedly, Mercury and Venus are smaller than the Earth, but the moon. Look at the moon's tides, how it impacts us. Look at how the sun impacts us every single day. The sun rising, providing warmth, life, nourishment. And the moon too, reflecting the sunlight. Looking at full moons and how they impact people, and how psychologists have found trends in behaviors. Of people acting a little bit crazier on full moon, a little bit more emotional, a little bit less rational. Look at how huge. Oh, and also the tides. How that's related to the moon and it's the rippling waters of Earth. Then look at how big Mars is, how big Jupiter is, how big Saturn. I mean, God, Jupiter alone is so large that it draws away meteors and other dangerous, comets and other dangerous space paraphernalia away from Earth. It is so powerful that because Jupiter's there and the sun is here, the gravitational pull pulls away anything that would destroy the Earth. And in fact, they say that a lot of astronomers think that for a solar system to have life, you need to have a Jovian planet present to draw away, with its gravity, any kind of dangerous space travelers, if you will, any kind of asteroids or whatever. So think about that. Then think about Saturn. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune are the largest planets in our solar system. They're absolutely huge. And, they obviously, all the planets are impacting each other gravitationally, or otherwise they'd be flying off everywhere. There's an order to it. And not to mention they are being impacted by the sun, hence why we're all revolving around it. So I can't help, in no kind of condescending way, I can't help but laugh when I hear that some kind of when I hear that people don't believe that the stars, the planets essentially, have some kind of influence over us, because these astronomical bodies are so astronomically larger than the Earth that and their influence can be seen. I urge you, if you are a skeptic, to check out astrology. It's fascinating. Start with your natal chart. You'll explore, see different perspectives on those energies. Don't be confined or refined, or defined rather. That's another thing about astrology that's often said, is people don't like to be defined, and that may be the traditional astrologist approach, but in those times, thousands of years ago, humanity had a lot of developing to do, and there's amazing astrologers and sources of information out there that is absolutely incredible. I truly urge you to check out cafeastrology.com. There's so many really great astrologers on YouTube. Just Googling astrological placements is incredible. So if you're skeptical, I advise you to check it out for yourself. To see what those placements have to say, to check out your natal chart, and get your right birth time too. If you don't have it, okay, look at Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and Jupiter and whatnot to get, accurate info. I just think it's so funny to think that there are human beings on Earth. And again, I hope I don't come across condescending, because I don't mean to think of myself as better than anyone, or, high and mighty or whatever. No, that's not my intention at all. I don't think about myself in those terms. I don't even like to compare people. But it's really funny to me to think that otherwise geniuses, there are human beings out there that think that, the stars, the planets don't impact us. Our star, the sun, doesn't impact us in a quantifiable way that you can see and observe and predict psychologically. And because it's so logical, it's so obvious, oh my God, already everything I said before about the gravitational pull, and just it astounds me. It truly does astound me. But at the same time, I have to say, there are some people out there who are skeptical of astrology with a vitriol. There's an anger there. It's very acerbic. And, I think that there are people that criticize everything that are like that. And maybe those people just need to be like that until they... I don't know. But all I know is that, that's my perspective on skeptics of astrology. And if you have another point or some kind of question as per the validity. I myself use, I get this question a lot too. I myself use Western astrology. I've studied Vedic a little. It's interesting. I haven't delved into it too much because I'm kind of turned off by, at least before, and I'm really not knowledgeable about modern Vedic astrology. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I just know that before that Uranus, Neptune, Pluto weren't even taken into account. And considering again how huge those, well, Pluto's not that huge, but Uranus and Neptune at least, how huge those planets are. And honestly, I've studied Pluto quite a bit, and I'm convinced that it certainly does change life on Earth to a degree that's worth noticing, worth studying. And so yeah, that's all I really know. About Vedic. But anyways, that's my experiences with Western, and yeah, I figured it'd be good to make this video. It's not quite as handy as I figured, but considering my videos are crazy long, usually this is good. So, namaste, fellow Earthlings and people of the solar system.